Yeah, I feel like taking some old school gangster shit today, a fistful of dollars, Clint Eastwood style. This movie took place back in 1964, but it's basically Western times, you know what I'm saying? So we got our man popping off, his name is Joe. He ends up in this area with these two houses. He sees this little kid running out of one house to the other. His name is Jesus. He goes to this one house and these two gangsters kick him out. They end up kicking him and beating him and stuff. His father Julio comes out to save his son. One of the gangsters looks at Joe, but Joe was just sipping and getting a drink of water from the fountain. From the waterfall, my bad. From a well, damn, what the fuck am I talking about? And then he sees this other woman in the hut by the name of Maristo. Turns out we find out that's Jesus' mom. So why these gangsters have their mom in another hut? So Joe ends up entering this town that's not really far away. He goes into this bar. This bartender there, his name is Silvantro. He tells him it's basically like a ghost town. Like anybody comes through here basically gets deaded. Now the town is basically being controlled by the Rojos and the Baxters. Now the Rojos have access to guns while the Baxters have access to, being able to get more gold and money. But the Rojos have more power because they're led by this dude named Ramon. Ramon basically runs shit. Now when Joe gets to the town, the Baxters are already picking with him. This is before he got to the bar. So basically Joe has it in his mind to confront the Baxters. He looks at the pallbearers like, hey yo, get 3 coffins ready. I'm like, shit. So it's 4-on-1, Joe ends up lighting up all 4 of these niggas. And then the sheriff comes out, he like, look man, we don't want no trouble. But as Joe's going back to the bar, he looks at the pallbearers like, hey yo, my bad, 4 coffins. So basically because he knocked off like 4 Baxters, he endeared himself to the Rojos. Since he did a job for the Rojos, they end up giving him $100. Now back then, $100 right now could equal up to like 100,000. These are Western times. I'm probably not sure about that. Maybe about 10,000 nowadays. So they give him some lodgings for a little bit, and guess who invites him in to make sure he's got it safe? The guy that was kicking around Jesus earlier. It turns out he actually works for the Rojos. So as he's getting settled in, he hears this conversation with Rubio. Rubio is actually Ramon's brother. Now Rubio basically doesn't trust Joe because he's like, okay, where'd this guy come from? But the other guys are like, look, we don't want war, we want peacetime. So you're thinking to yourselves, why do you want peace all of a sudden after he just did his job for him? So Joe comes out of nowhere and he's like, yeah, thanks for the lodgings, but I'd rather be able to stay over at the bartender spot. They're like, all right, cool, do your thing. But when he's overhearing the conversation, he heard where Ramon could possibly be. So Joe ends up going to the spot in the desert and he actually finds Ramon and his boys meeting up with some soldiers from the government. This was after they came through with this town with this carriage or whatever like that. Now we're assuming there's something important in this carriage because they're not letting nobody look into it. Even when he tried to, somebody had a gun in his face. It was like, hey, fall back. So back to the meeting between the Ramon and the soldiers. It turns out the soldiers actually had some gold in a treasure chest and whatnot. So the soldiers were going to trade the gold for some guns, right? But then Ramon turns on all the soldiers and start blasting them niggas and takes the gold for himself. So that they got gold and the guns. So then Ramon and some of the boys come back to the Rojos. And this is why they plan to keep peace within the town. They want to make it look like the governments had beef with each other so it could keep it off the back of the Rojos. So when they see all these dead soldiers laid out, they wanted to think it's a government issue. And they basically want to lay low because eventually they're going to end up killing all the Baxters. And we also found out Ramon basically kidnapped Marista. See, Marista is actually Julio's wife. But I think the thing is, Julio actually owes the Rojos money. Either that or Ramon's just being a jerk. But Ramon actually decided to let Jesus and Julio live only because of the fact that they have Marista. So that was technically the deal. So Joe gets his idea where he's about to make this money. Peep this shit. Joe and Silvantro go out to this spot with coffins that don't make it look, say obvious. That they're just on their pallbearer shit, right? They go to the spot where the dead soldiers are, and Joe ends up putting 2 dead soldiers next to this graveyard, right? But he's just having them sitting there looking slumped over like they're asleep. So we're back in the town, and we're at the Baxter's house, right? Now the sheriff is talking to his wife. Now while his wife is upstairs, Joe done snuck upstairs. The sheriff comes upstairs, and Joe gets the drop on him. Now he's about to infiltrate his plan. Now he tells the sheriff and the wife about the situation that happened in the desert, but here's the thing, he tells them that 2 of the guys are still alive. So now the Baxters are obviously pissed at the Rojos. Now he sneaks over to the Rojos and tells Ramon the same shit. So Ramon's thinking to himself, we gotta waste these 2 guys, otherwise they're gonna foil our goddamn plan. And the government's basically gonna come after them, right? So the Baxters are already at the gravesite, meanwhile the Rojos about to go over there. So while all this is going down, Joe sneaks into the Rojo camp, and this one spot is being guarded by the same guy that was kicking around Jesus in the beginning of the movie. He ends up knocking him out somehow without being detected. He goes inside the spot, it's like a bunch of barrels. Some of the barrels have gold in it, some of the barrels have kerosene in it. I won't say kerosene, basically alcohol. Cause that's right, I forgot, they sell liquor and guns. So he takes a couple bags of gold, and accidentally he gets startled by Marista. He ends up taking her out of there and basically giving her to the Baxters. But that's basically when he snuck into the sheriff's home. Now you got the Rojos and the Baxters having a gun shootout at this gravesite. Now Ramon in the middle of the gunfight, he sees the 2 dudes that are laying on the gravesite, the 2 officers, but their backs are turned to him. He ends up shooting them done deal dead as shit, not knowing to himself that they were already dead. So after the gunfight was over, the Rojos somehow ended up kidnapping Baxter's head man Antonio. But when they get back, they find out Marista is missing. Now, I don't know how Joe knew they was gonna kidnap somebody, but alright. Sunup comes down and they're about to make a trade for Antonio for Marista. So Joe has managed to put the two sides against each other throughout this plan. And throughout this planning, Joe ended up collecting $500 from each side. So he got about a G in his pocket and some extra gold. So the Baxters basically keep their mouth shut because they know that Joe has to stick with the Rojos. So they end up having a party and then Joe ends up getting drunk, or so we thought. They picked him up and put him in his room, but once they left, we realized Joe wasn't drunk. He ends up sneaking out, riding his horse, going back to the two houses or whatever. Now Jesus and Julio are in one cabin, and the other cabin is Marista and about 5 of Rojo's guards. Joe comes in out the blue, laces all them niggas, gets Marista out, gets Marista, Jesus, and Julio together, gives them about $500 and tells them to get the hell out of here, run. And so they basically make their escape. The Rojos heard the gunshots, they go over to the cabin, and they think somehow the Baxters had something to do with the shit. So while Joe somehow makes his way back to the room, he sneaks in, but then they got guns to him and they find out like, hey, what the fuck you doing out the room? They put 2 and 2 together to think, yeah, Joe's behind us. So basically like, oh shit, he's caught. So then they basically take turns just beating the shit out of him. But they don't kill him yet because they want to know where Marista went. So they basically leave him in a room with the barrels. He's just beaten up, all fucked up. So 2 of the guys come back in the room after a while. One of the guys is the one that was kicking Jesus at the beginning. So when they come back in the room, this big ass barrel's rolling down this thing and then smashing both of them niggas. Done deal daddy shit. We find out Joe pushed a barrel on both of them niggas. He sneaks out the back door for a minute. The other niggas come in, they can't find him. And he lights the room on fire so they can get out the room. Meanwhile, Joe hops out the other way. Now basically they're on a hunt to find Joe. Joe sneaks around the back of some houses. They end up thinking to themselves, who's befriending Joe? Oh yeah, the guy from the bar, Savantro. They end up beating him up, tying him up, and basically kidnapping him. Joe ends up hiding out in the coffin near the pallbearer spot. So he's gonna get the pallbearer's help to basically sneak out of town for a minute. But before all that happens, Ramon, Rubio, and his camp, they basically get some barrels up and then start lighting the Baxter spot on fire. They all coming out like, yo, don't shoot, don't shoot. The Rojos end up wasting all them niggas, including the sheriff and his wife. All the Baxters done deal dead shit. So now Joe and the pallbearer are hiding in this like mine or something. He's basically been recovering and whatnot. So the pallbearer went through the town. He tells Joe about the situation with Savantro. They end up kidnapping him. And he also brings him some guns and a dynamite. He was able to sneak it out of the town somehow. So now it's time for the final showdown, nigga. So early morning, the Rojos are basically torturing Savantro because obviously they want to know where Marista went. And they want to find Joe too. All you see is a couple of houses getting exploded all of a sudden, and then throughout the smoke, you see Joe just standing there and shit, ready for the beef. So it's basically Ramon and 5 of his niggas left against just Joe. So Joe's just walking around like he's about to just go save Savantro by himself, like just untie him and shit like it's nothing. Ramon ends up shooting him in his chest. He's getting back up. He shoots him like 5 times in his chest. He's still getting back up. You're thinking to yourself, how the fuck is this happening? So earlier they told this backstory about how Ramon is always aiming for the chest, aiming for the heart. He was taking target practice on this like mannequin or whatever like that, and it looked like a heart shape the way he was shooting. He gives him this speech like, what's a 45 to a rifle? So Joe knew in the back of his mind he was always going to try to hit the heart, but I'm thinking to myself, what if he wanted to hit your head? You're done deal dead as shit. I swear, 5 different shots he was aiming for his heart. I'm like, but then we find out he had a metal plate under his sash, so that's why he kept getting back up. I'm like, yeah, Joe's not just going to live through all this shit without some type of backup. And he pulls out his 4.5 and laces half these niggas, all these niggas except for Ramon. Then Ramon's got like 1 bullet in his hand, his gun on the ground. Joe's gun's on the ground too. So it's basically a quick draw match to see who could put the bullet in their gun quicker to shoot their opponent. Joe put it in quicker, you got the eye stare down, and then he laces Ramon done deal dead as shit. So while he's walking towards him, you think to yourself the whole time, where the fuck was Rubio at? Then all of a sudden you see a rifle coming out of one of the windows, and right when he's about to shoot, Savantro peeped he had the shotgun, blasted his ass, Rubio falls out the window, done deal dead as shit. This was after Joe rescued him from being tied up because he shot the rope, then got him down. So basically Savantro like, hey, yo, what you gonna do now? He's like, you're not gonna stick around for all this? What, with the American government and the Mexican government trying to get back their gold? No thanks, I'm good. So he got his money, a little bit of the gold from the Rojos, but he ain't want to take that big ass treasure chest of gold. He said, nah, leave that there, that's government shit. And he goes about his business, and that's the end of the movie. And that's Fistful of Dollars for you, crazy. I might do the sequel for a few more dollars. No, that's really what it's called. Bottom line, old school Western beef. He basically came into town, put 2 squads against each other, if they weren't already against each other, saved the whole family, and got all these niggas deaded. Typical Western, right? There you go. Classic gangsta shit.